Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Hockey Night, National Hockey Night on the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, off Motor City Mad Mouth. Please be joined by my veteran crew. Great job to the kids last week. Cody Spink and Mike Whitaker did a good job filling in for Mark and Mike. These kids are, you can look forward to them seeing them in the future. But tonight, we got the veterans on, and we're going to have a good show tonight. Well, Mike Santos is back from the 2025 Wrestling Championship, and he'll talk about that later in the show. Glad to have you back.
Great to be back.
And Mark Mariday's back with us. Glad to have you back, Cody and all.
Thanks for having me back. It's been a tumultuous week for me, so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, we're glad. Well, maybe I'll give you a chance to let off a little steam. George Eichhorn's last show of the week. Of course, he's been on two other ones. Could have used it probably on Tuesday night, but I did everything I could to fill up the lineup card to give you that night off. It worked out really well anyway.
Good to be back. Good to be back, Scott. Thank you.
Well, the title of the show is really a good one. Will Hockeytown get a women's pro hockey team? Get this. North American record for attendance of a women's hockey game was 14,288 at Little Caesars Arena in Hockeytown. Detroit deserves women's pro hockey. What do you think, Mr. Detroit?
Well, it might be easier said than done. There's a lot of work that goes into something like this. And the thing that really impresses me is that, they did this last season. The Women's League came in for one game, and they did a really good job then. I think they had about 13,000 at that game, 12 or 13. But this year was even more special because obviously they set the attendance record. And I don't know if the fan base is solid enough to say we're going to get one, but boy, oh boy, Detroit sure has put its best foot forward to try to get a franchise because the fans turned out and they loved it. And it was just not just all ladies and girls, it's men and boys. The crowd's very mixed and everybody loves it. The women are playing some great hockey. So again, Detroit was one of these offshoots, a satellite, if you will, locations, but the league's got to be taking notice, Scott. You betcha. And I really think that Detroit would be a great place. Not sure when, but it would be a great place to have a franchise.
What do you think, Mike?
I'm all for pro women's hockey. I think the PWHL is a great step forward, especially before this. We had a couple of, I guess you'd call them rival leagues the last few years before last year. But I think they've got to walk before they run. I think they can learn a lot from the WNBA that's been around for more than 25 years now. I also I think it's great when they have big turnouts like they had in Detroit. They've had single game turnouts like that in places like Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa. But I'm not sure they're ready to sustain that, even in Detroit, for a full schedule. And that's why I say I think they need to walk before they run, especially in this country. I think there's a longer tradition, not necessarily a better tradition, but a longer tradition of women's hockey in Canada. I look at the team that plays in Boston, and they play actually at the Songus Arena, which is where the UMass Lowell Riverhawks play. It's about a 8,000 seat building, and they don't draw very well. That's 30 miles north of Boston, in one of the hockey hotbeds of the country. I don't honestly know how the team is drawn in Minnesota. And I know the team that plays in New York and Uniondale has really suffered when it comes to attendance. So it's a long road. It's a long road. It's a different setup. The league itself is a single entity league, which for those who are listening, there's actually one person that owns the whole league and all the teams. So all the hiring is done centrally from one location. I see some of the things that are happening this summer with WNBA players who are starting to think they can demand more money, right, without maybe understanding that the NBA has propped that league up for years and years. And now they've got a bona fide celebrity or star in Caitlin Clark. and the girls and even the coaches in the league seem to treat her with jealousy instead of the respect that they should, so they can grow their league. So again, I think there's a lot the PWHL can learn from the NBA.
Right.
And if they take their time and walk before they run, I think they'll be successful in the long run.
Okay. Ralph Williams is a comment. Hello, guys. Pittsburgh is getting a women's hockey team, which will start up in a few years. The Penguins are sponsoring it. Okay, good to know.
Well, Pittsburgh was one of the original cities that were in consideration for a PWHL team last year. They decided against Pittsburgh for whatever reason, but I do know they were one of the final U.S. cities that they were looking at.
Yeah, I dare the WNBA players go on strike. That league will be broke so fast it's ridiculous. I think they'd be overplaying their hand and making a huge mistake, even if they try to do it. But we'll see. If they do that, that's the beginning of the end. I'll turn it over to Mark.
I think the NHL needs to get behind it a little bit more and throw more money into it if they really want to stabilize and substantiate what they have there. You know, if they want to grow that league, definitely. I agree. It's going to take a little bit of time for those teams to anchor down, get a fan base, and have people coming in. That being said, I enjoy hockey, whether it's females playing or males playing. You know, whether it's youth hockey or you know, even beer league hockey. I love the game. I love watching the game. And if it's on TV, and I'll stop and watch it for a while. I really will. Now, that's not everybody's mentality, especially in North America. But I really hope that they're able to stabilize and get the NHL to get behind them a little bit more. With the WNBA, I know the NBA's behind them. They're funding them. And there's absolutely no way their salaries are going to go up because they're not drawing. At the end of the day, you got to draw people to draw money. I think Angel Reese, I'm sorry, fellas, but she's way out of line in things that she says. You know, if she really wants to be, you know, admonished by everybody and be accepted as a superstar like she thinks she is, she ought to start aligning herself with Caitlin Clark instead of talking her down.
Yeah, I think I agree 100% with what you just said as far as for them to succeed in the long run, they're going to need the NHL. I don't know if the NHL is interested in getting involved. They don't seem to be, at least at this time. But you mentioned the WNBA. I mean, the WNBA is on ESPN because it's brokered as part of the NBA package that's negotiated.
Okay.
The NBA. You know, they when they broker these packages for TV, they say that, you know, if you want to do our NBA games, you have to do X amount of WNBA games as well, and you've got to feature them on Sports Center, and you've got to do all these things to help promote the WNBA. And frankly, I think, you know, in the long run, the PWHL is going to need the same type of support from the NHL if they really want to get to the mainstream hockey fan. And one other thing that, again, I agree with, there's nothing wrong with the game or the sport. The women play the game great, and it's an interesting game. It's an exciting game, but it's just you know, they're walking uphill in this country when it comes to women's sports, and I think Barbara's right. I think you're going to need the NHL input at some point.
The only thing I'll say to close off the topic, having a lot of big stuff today, is Candy and I are looking forward to going to the NCAA Women's Final Four in Tampa. It's going to be quite an event. And I'm looking to get a lot of great content out there. And this will give me a really good feel for how much the sport has grown, especially in the collegiate level. You talk about your big marquee event with the wrestling event, Mike. I can't wait to tell you what the stories I'm going to come away with for the Women's Final Four in Tampa. And I thank the University of South Florida, my alma mater, for having handed us getting passes there.
Yeah, well, this past weekend they just had the Women's Frozen Four in Minnesota, and it was an overtime final. Actually, Wisconsin tied it up with a penalty shot goal late in the third period. A girl played the puck in the crease with her hand and set up a penalty shot. Wisconsin coach Mark Johnson brought all the girls in front of the bench and asked who wants to take the shot. And the first girl that raised her hand, he put her out there, and she scored. And they ended up winning in overtime, beating Ohio State.
Yeah, Candy's smiling in the background. I heard that all week long. Come on, Candy, show it out here in public. You have the right to put yourself on here and celebrate that.
Hey,
There
go
you go.
Wisconsin. It was awesome.
There you go. She got her celebratory well.
Yes.
They actually had an awesome season. I think they only had like 1 or 2 losses the whole season, and they outscored their opponents by a huge amount. So, and it's just amazing what they did this year. And this is actually Wisconsin's 8th national championship for women.
Wow.
Amazing.
Pretty good. All right. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Mike. Now I'm looking forward to seeing Connecticut win the whole thing so I can meet Gino Oriana. So there you go. I mean, that would be incredible. I hate to see Juju Watkins go down, but my goal is to see Gino. All right. Well, let's go ahead and continue on the men's frozen pond. This is an interesting story. When the Edmonton Oilers lost to the Florida Panthers 4-3, their 5th straight on February 27th, Coach Kris Knoblauch was quoted as saying, "I felt like there were a few passengers and there were some guys that didn't put the effort we needed." And the Oilers currently are 41, 24, and 5 and 3rd in the Pacific. So, Mike, I'm going to ask you this, okay? Because you're probably more into it, and other guys can comment on it. But I really want to hear your point of view probably the most. Is that a common expression these days by coaches?
I don't know if it's common, but in the last couple of weeks, there's been a couple of coaches that have actually said something similar. One of them lost his job today, and the other one, Andrew Burnett in Nashville, said it a couple of weeks ago. But so yeah, I don't know if it's something that's being commonly said. I'm not sure if it was fair or not. I mean, he knows his team better than I do. But I do know that team, to me, looks like a tired hockey club. I mean, that's a team that went to the brink Game 7 last year in Florida. Like everybody that goes that far, they had a short time to recover. And then when you think of the Edmonton Oilers, no one has as much travel over the course of the season as the Edmonton Oilers. And I think they're just a worn down hockey team. And playing in the West this year doesn't help. I mean, there's some real strong teams: Colorado, Dallas, Winnipeg, Las Vegas or Vegas. Even teams like LA are strong contenders. So there aren't too many easy nights in the Western Conference, and now they're still trying to get their 2 top players, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, back healthy before the playoffs start. So it's I just think that they've had a lot to overcome in the last 10 months, and it's a tired team.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, because when I saw the word a few passengers, thinking to myself, and like you said, Mike, I've been seeing this a lot in the last few weeks. Hockey's a one sport where these guys put everything they've got in all the time. Then I hear Kris Knoblauch saying that. Obviously, they're on the heels of their 5th straight loss, didn't help either. You just try to connect the dots, and that's what you end up getting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess tired hockey club. George and Mark, real quickly, okay, your thoughts about tired passengers, few passengers.
Well, I think even in Detroit, Barber, we see it. We saw it with before they fired Lalonde. The team was just going nowhere, not making any sense at all with what they were trying to accomplish. And then when Stevie Y got rid of him right after Christmas, Todd McClellan came. Todd did a really good job. They started really well, and then they started going back to some bad patterns, bad habits, and a few injuries. I'm just saying, in Detroit, I think every player in the NHL, whatever professional sports, got to look themselves in the mirror and say, "Hey, look, I'm giving my best effort." Now, we know it's impossible. They can't do it every single game. It's just not physically possible. I'm saying during the whole year. Playoffs, that's different. You got to be up for that. But I'm saying for the whole year. But when you hear coaches making comments like this or insinuating stuff like that, because Todd insinuated a little bit about the Red Wings recently too. But it wakes you up. It really does. It makes you wonder, what are these guys doing? And like I said, again, I'm not a player, so I can't say that they get up or don't get up one game or the other, but it just seems like it's happening more. If you hear the coaches talking about it like this publicly.
Anything you want to add, Barber? I mean, I think
Yeah,
about the fact that you have a 5-2 loss on the heels of a fifth straight loss. So, and then you put it together. And but bear in mind though, the Oilers are still in third in the Pacific, so they're still very much in the thick of things out west. But go ahead,
like Mike
Barber,
said, though, that's a team without Draisaitl and McDavid. And Draisaitl's going to come back before McDavid, first of all. So that should be interesting to see how this thing closes out for them. But coaches wouldn't have to try and motivate their team by saying things like that if they had leadership inside the locker room. Sometimes you got to close that door after a couple losses and reorganize as grown men who play a professional sport. It shouldn't take the coach to have to say something like that to do that. And I don't fault the coach at all for that. I mean, actually, fellas, from my perspective, I think it falls back on the leadership of that team. I think it falls back on McDavid. I think it falls back on Draisaitl. Fellas, close the damn door and get it right. Get it right in the locker room, because the coach doesn't play the game. He tells you what to do. You play the game.
Well, let's not kid ourselves. Connor McDavid, we know, is the face of the franchise, but they're always going to fire the coach first, anyways, and not the players. That's a given.
If there's one team in the league, I mean, you mentioned Detroit. Columbus has taken a nosedive here recently.
Yeah.
I mean, Boston has taken a big dive. They're not even close. If there's one team that deserves some slack, I think it's Edmonton.
Okay.
Oh,
And
the
next,
Jays.
and just so you know, next week on next week's Sports Exchange, we're going to talk about the coaches that have been let go so far. We won't do it tonight, but we're only going to talk about one of them tonight. And that happened today. That's John Tortorella, was fired by the Philadelphia Flyers, who've lost 6 in a row, 11 of their last 12, haven't made the playoffs in his 3 years. He was 97, 103, and 33 with Philly. His career mark is 770, 648, and 165 with 37 ties. He's ninth all-time on the all-time list, and the second most USA-born coaches after Peter Laviolette with 841. He has obviously 770 wins, and as I mentioned, Bradshaw is the interim coach. Michael, start with you. John Tortorella, he's a heck of a coach. Do you think this might have been his last coaching stop? He was in the midst of a rebuild here, so that wasn't the easiest situation for him to walk into, and he knew it. And the Flyers have gone through a lot of coaches lately.
Yeah, I don't think this was necessarily the right situation for him.
Right.
But there's only 32 jobs, and if somebody offers you one of them and you're an NHL coach, you take it.
Right.
I also don't think this was necessarily a good time to make the move. I mean, they could have waited a couple of weeks.
Right.
It's not really going to make a difference. If anything, I think it's gonna make an excuse for those players that are still in the locker room for the last couple of weeks to not have to worry about it. Where at least I think Tortorella, your practices still would have been fruitful. They would have gained some development in the next few weeks. I mean, he would have got more out of these guys than an interim coach is going to get. It just really makes the ultimate problem there glaring, which is there's no plan.
Right.
I guess you got to point to Keith Jones. He's the president of hockey operations. You got to point to Danny Briere. He's the GM. But they've been there a couple of years now, and there's no plan. I think they're probably in worse shape now than when they started the season. They still don't have a clue about what they're doing with their goaltending in the future.
Right.
They've got 2 players, maybe Konechny and Michkov, who are going to help them in the future, but they've got nobody to help them, nobody around them.
Right.
They don't know what type of team they want to be. They're not loaded with early draft picks, to start rebuilding the team. I think this isn't about coaching. This is about they need a real plan there and to figure out what direction they want to go in. And then you can decide, what type of coach do I want to bring in. I mean, Anaheim did this a couple of years ago when Pat Verbeek went in there. He had a plan. This is how we're going to rebuild it. and I'm going to hire a coach that can help me build this thing. He hired Greg Cronin, who went in there, and now you see, I mean, they were a little bit better last year. Now this year they're a 500 team. Next year I expect they'll challenge for a playoff spot. And he had a guy like, for instance, Zegras, who was floundering there, and now he's put guys around him. They made a great trade this winter with the Rangers to get a veteran leader in there, a captain of all things. And now now they're on track because they have a plan. I think that's what Philly misses more than anything is a plan.
So keep in mind that Philadelphia lost 7-2 to Toronto, and Tortorella came down on himself. I was wondering whether he's begging to get fired last night just to get out of there, because to let a guy go with 9 games left in an 81-game season just seems to be strange. I just don't seem to get that logic. Maybe he was begging to get fired. Maybe Barrera said, yeah, okay, go ahead, go away. You're burned out. I don't know the logic. Even Wayne Fontes once coined the phrase, what does it take? Or no, Darryl Rogers once said, what does it take to get fired around here? Well, you play for it. I said, all right, you're out, Wayne Fontes. But George, you don't have to get into that. I'm just trying to compare the two situations. That's all.
Well, I think I do. There's one place that is going to take a look at him, and it's the place where he's from, and that's Boston. They need a coach. Yeah. He's a Boston guy.
Okay.
And I think, depending on what Boston's plan is, I think they'll at least take a look at Tortorella for next year.
Interesting. Okay. Hey, any of you two want to add to it?
Yeah, I think that Tortorella has shelf life no matter where he coaches. Whatever he's trying to do, he gets so far with it and his shelf life runs out. I don't know if it's because of the way he handles the guy at the end of the day. I have no idea from that perspective, but he definitely has a shelf life. He keeps moving on. He can get a team started. He'd probably be a better assistant coach than anything as far as, his tactics. So a head coach can kind of reel him back when he's getting himself a little bit up in a tizzy. Mike, do you remember, though, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago when the Lehigh Valley team, they were loaded with talent?
Yeah.
And I don't understand what happened there. Where those guys all go? The Flyers should have been off the chain by now with the talent that they had there. Good, granted, they lost Hart. I get that, but the other guys that they had, what happened?
Yeah, they made a lot of bad moves and didn't restock the cupboards. And I think that was, the previous management team. Before that it was Chuck Fletcher. And then before that, it was it Holmgren again? I forget. But I think those guys were trying to get there too fast, maybe to save their own jobs. They made a couple ill-advised moves with the Flyers, with some of those high-priced guys that they got stuck with, and then didn't move at the deadline. And here they are, and then. They've made a ton of coaching changes here. Mike Yeo and Scott Gordon. It's been a revolving door. Of course, Tortorella hasn't made it through 2 full seasons, and then with the management change. Again, there's no plan from up top, and until they get a plan in place, I don't know what to tell them.
George, any final thoughts, real quick, before we go to a station break?
Well, he's the general manager was quoted as saying, Torts is a complicated man. He's a complicated coach, but he's a blast to work with because he challenges you. I truly believe he made me a better general manager. Well, he might have loved working with him, but obviously they didn't see the progress that they should have. You got to go back to his last Stanley Cup win, of course, was with the Lightning in 2004. That's a long ways away. I don't think the game was passed him by. I do think he's a good coach, and whatever happened in Philadelphia, it just was a sad situation. Did not ever expect it to be like this. So basically the same that you guys are saying.
Yeah, they have no identity.
Yeah.
They were always, of course, back in the 70s and even in the 80s, the 90s, and even 10 years ago, they were always a big physical team. Even guys when they had guys like Hartnell, right, and those kind of guys up front. But they're just not a down and dirty, physical, hard to play against team. They have no identity at all.
I can tell you this. I've seen his press conferences, and I would really like to meet Tortorella. I really would. For some reason or another, I don't know why. I feel I can relate to this guy. I really do. I'm a fiery, intense individual myself. I'm not afraid to admit it at times because when you want to win, Mike, who doesn't have that fiery, intense side on the planet? Some people show it in a different way. I don't know. He does the best he can to relate with the media, but he has been a winner wherever he's gone. Some of the situations he's inherited haven't been very good. But as Mark alluded to, John Tortorella does have shelf life left. This was a dysfunctional, toxic situation with no direction at all. Keith Jones, like you say, has been there a couple of years, and of course Daniel Briere. All right, so you wanted to let him go with 9 games left. We'll see what Brad Shaw, no relation to Terry Bradshaw, okay, does the rest of the way. All right, we're going to go to a station break, a few more topics. We're going to find out how much fun that Mike had last week. I'm definitely looking forward to getting some stories, a few more good topics. This is the Sports Exchange on the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. Go ahead, Candy.
South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by your host, Scott, the Motor City Madmouth Morgan Roth, and the foreword was written by another panelist here, George Eichhorn. It's a great book. It talks about how media has changed over the last 40 plus years. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Google, and Apple Books. There's also a link on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where there is a plethora of great other content as well. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can find us wherever you get your podcast. If you see the red subscribe button in that lower right-hand corner, go ahead, click it, like us, share us with all your friends and family. Monday nights, we talk baseball. Tuesday nights, we talk football. Wednesday and Thursday nights on the First Sports Exchange and Fire Up, you never know what we're talking about. And then on Thursday nights, obviously, we are talking hockey. If you want to be a guest or have show ideas, you can always email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And if you want to advertise, call Scott 954-304-4941.
And bear in mind, this show is presented by. Well, go ahead, Mike. You tell them who the show is presented by. It's your company.
By Hockey Operations.
There you go. Presented by Hockey Operations. I gotta let the guy tell this is presented by. He's the owner, right? And a good thing to do. Good evening, Brian Pettit. He'll be on later on. Fire up. All right, Mike. Time of the show where you get to talk about your segment. So Mike update Santos update. But we're going to talk about your experience at the 2025 Wrestling Championships in Philadelphia from March 20th to the 22nd. It's all yours, Mike.
Yeah, it was a fantastic experience. I mean, whether you're a wrestling fan or you're not a wrestling fan, it's something I'd encourage anybody to take in. It's 3 great days, morning session and evening sessions. The Wells Fargo Center in Philly did a great job. The matches were fantastic, especially the semifinal and the final matches. I mean, we had, of the 10 weight classes, we had 5 that went into overtime in the final, and of course, we had a great conclusion in the heavyweight match with Gable Stevenson going down in the last 20 seconds. It was a fantastic weekend. I had the opportunity to sit actually right next to Anthony Robles, who, if people don't know who that is, he was. There's a movie out right now called Glory, which tells the story of his life. He was born with one leg, walked onto the Arizona State wrestling team, and ended up winning a national championship in 2012 as one-legged wrestler for Arizona State. So I'd encourage everybody to check out that movie. It's being streamed right now, and if anybody's interested, Jennifer Lopez plays his mother in the movie, so maybe that'll get some people interested. But yeah, great event. There was the rematch of Mendez and Hardy from last year when Mendez put Hardy in the spladle, in the semifinals, and then they rematch in the finals this year at 131, and Hardy goes up, 5-0, and then Mendez comes back and ends up wins the match 12-9. That was a fantastic match. Carter Starachi, 184 for Penn State, wins his 5th national championship, unprecedented. It's just a great night all around.
Okay, great stuff. We'll leave it at that. 2 more topics.
And next year's in Cleveland. If anybody wants to go, I'll be going.
Oh, you gonna make this an annual thing for you every year?
That's not far. That's not far.
George should be able to make that one.
Not far
If he
from
can't get,
Detroit.
if he can't go there, we'll go to our credentials department, South Florida Tribune. We'll get you a pass, George.
The other thing too, just mention too, Penn State ran away with the team title. It was the highest point total ever at over 170 points. So and
Well, I remember, Mike, a couple of weeks ago, you told us, you said Penn State was going to win that team title. You were absolutely right, Mike.
yeah, they had 10 All-Americans, which essentially what means they had an All-American in every weight class. That's how good
Wow.
they are.
There you go, George. That's something you could hit next year.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more topics I want to get to. Let's talk about Sergei Bobrovsky. Moves into 10th all-time in goalie wins. I'll just give you his record: 426, 239, and 57 ties. Mike, this guy, to me, he has a Stanley Cup in his pocket, one in Columbus, one in Florida. Where do you think that Sergei Bobrovsky ranks amongst the best goaltenders of all time?
Boy, that's tough. I mean, I think he's definitely of all time. He's definitely a top 20 goaltender.
Okay.
It'd be hard to put him in the top 10. I mean, he's been absolutely lights out the last 2 years now. And they're going to need him to be lights out this year, especially because they're going to need to finish in first place. But I there's been so many great goaltenders. I mean, just to the top of mind, Patrick Roy, Marty Brodeur, Ken Dryden, Jerry Cheevers. I mean, there's just been so many of them. It's hard.
Hasek.
Yeah, Dominic Hasek. I mean, like we could go on and on, right? We're not even touching the Terry Sawchucks or the Glenn Halls or any of these types of people. I mean, here's one for you: is he better than Tom Barrasso? Not at this point. Not at this point, right? I mean, Barrasso had a couple of cups, won some Vezina trophies, so yeah, maybe a top 20 guy, but that's where I'd put him right now. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way.
All right. What do you guys think?
I align myself with Mike on that. I think he's a top 20 guy. I don't think he performed quite as well in Columbus as he has in Florida, but also the system he's playing in front of in Florida dictates itself to a kind of a 4-line. Let's get out there, skate hard, play 200 feet, help the goalie out, come back, help the goalie out. Whereas maybe he didn't get so much of that in Columbus. He was also in Columbus in the earlier days when they were still trying to find their feet. And I believe, wasn't he there with Torts? Was he there with Torts?
He probably was, yeah.
So, but no, I agree with Mike. I think he's a top 20 guy. I don't know if he'll ever climb into the top 10. I like the Barrasso throw out there, Mike. That was a good one. I mean, I watched him play in person. He was magnificent back in the day.
What about you, George?
Well, I think that he does deserve top 20, but I wouldn't go any higher than that either. We were blessed in Detroit. You mentioned Hasek and, Kris Osgood and Mike Vernon when Detroit won its cups. But this guy, Sergei he's a really good athlete, He's really great at goaltending. I mean, they're blessed to have him. And I really think that, there's more time to talk about the awards or halls of fame and that sort of thing later on. But I think Florida is got everybody wanting to see if they can do it again. Another Stanley Cup, and he'd be the man to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I'd put him in the top 20. I'm going to throw another name out of you. I'm just really curious. How about Curtis Joseph? Is he a Hall of Famer? He played 943 career games with 454 wins. Mike, what do you think about Curtis Joseph?
Before 2 years ago, I would have said no, he's not a Hall of Famer.
Okay.
But you're going to put goalies like Mike Vernon in the Hall of Fame, I think he's every bit as good as Mike Vernon, and that's no slight to Mike Vernon. It just means if that's what the standards are, I think that, sure, I think he measures up fine.
Kris, so what do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I would agree. He played in that era with Eddie Belfour and Barrasso. That was a pretty good goalie era. That Dominic Hasek, Brodeur. There were some really good goalies during that era. I could see, like you said, Mike, if you're gonna put a guy like Vernon in there, you got to definitely give Joseph his fair due.
What about you, George?
I'm not so sure. I mean, he had a real tough time in Detroit with the Red Wings. Things just did not work out for him. I guess my viewpoint's a little tainted because of that. I'm not so sure he's a Hall of Famer. I'm not so sure Chris Osgood's a Hall of Famer. And he won 2 cups. So I'm going to say no for now on Cujo.
I'm up in the air about him. We'll see what happens. All right, last topic of the night. Since the Four Nations tournament, the worst records include the Chicago Blackhawks 3-10-2, Boston 3-8-3, Red Wings 4-10-1. Not looking good against Ottawa. The last I saw, they were trailing 2-0. Philadelphia was 4-8-2. San Jose 4-7-2. Buffalo 5-8-1. Columbus 5-7-1. New Jersey 6-8-0. Vancouver 6-8-1, and Pittsburgh ends up being 6-7-1. All right, we'll start with you, George. What's happened to these teams, and do you think any of them will be able to dig out of this?
I don't know. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, Mike, about, we see teams like Detroit and Boston, great franchises, great fans, great teams of years gone by. I think really that putting those guys right in, like Detroit had an afternoon game. And so Larkin and Raymond had to walk right into that lineup. They got like zero rest after the Four Nations. And I know you don't want to harp on that, okay, because there's other guys on the team. Detroit was, I guess you could say in one way, fortunate. They only had 2 players going, but that took a lot out of a lot of people. But that being said, the way the Red Wings have failed and Boston, I think, are 2 of the glaring ones for me, Scott.
What about you, Mike? You heard the list. Will any of them get out of this into a playoff?
No. I mean, and some of them have already given up, right? I mean, Boston made the decision at the trade deadline to get rid of, anybody they can, including their captain Marchand. But if you want to bring up the Four Nations again, talked about this before. I mean, New Jersey is one of those teams that you just mentioned that's in a slide. They lost perhaps their best player, right, in Hughes. And, another team that you mentioned that we just talked about, Boston, they lost their number 1 defenseman in Charlie McAvoy in the Four Nations. So,
Right.
I think it's going to be pretty tough. You want to talk about guys like Larkin, of course, like it's tough to play intense hockey like that for 2 weeks.
Right.
And then, 24 or 48 hours later, you're right back at it with your team fighting for a playoff spot. That's, all the other guys just got off a plane from Cancun, and and you're more beaten up than when you left. So I think it's going to be tough. I mean, the teams that have started on the downward slide, I don't think they're going to recover. I mean,
what about you, Mark?
Well, obviously I'm a Penguin fan. You know that. You guys all know that. I've just watched nothing but a nosedive. They're getting scorched by the Buffalo Sabres tonight, 6-1.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been really, really, really bad hockey. They did have a small streak of about four wins in a row, but they just got lit up by Tampa Bay. Saturday? They got lit up tonight. This team it's in limbo. They've got they have no chance of making the playoffs. And Dubas has sold off anything he could. He has 30 draft picks over the next 3 years to play around with, and he needs to figure out what exactly he wants to do with this team, because he's doing Sidney Crosby a disservice, in my opinion. Crosby got his point tonight. He has 20 consecutive seasons of having a point a game, which he passed Gretzky by doing that.
Wow.
So that's my feel.
And kudos to a guy like him, because you look around the league and you see some of these other veteran players that are on teams that are sinking in the standings, and they're not out there playing like he is every night.
Mike, he refuses to leave Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
The Penguins have been offered a lot, and he said, "I'm not going anywhere.
yeah,
I'm going to be here when you're good again."
yeah. But every game in, game out, no matter what the situation, he gives it his all. I mean, I look at Nashville, for instance, with Marchessault and Stamkos and those types of guys, and they're just playing out the string.
Yep.
And then you've got teams. I mean, I'd throw Detroit in this bucket right now as a team that probably, if they were going, could fight for one of those last playoff spots. But I don't believe in that room they think, even if they made the playoffs, that they could win a round.
Probably not, but just the idea of getting that big playoff drought off their back would be good.
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, right now the way things are looking for the Wings, I don't think any of these teams are going to get out of this at all. I think it's really deja vu for a lot of them. I really do. The Red Wings are simply running out of lives.
I mean, I think the interesting teams in the East are Montreal. I think Ottawa's going to do it.
I do too.
At this point, I mean, they're a team that was, you can tell that was their goal. We're getting in the playoffs this year, and that was goal number one for them. And then I think Montreal smells it a little bit now. And the team that really surprised me, because I thought a few weeks ago they were going to go away, is the Islanders, but they're knocking on the door for a spot now too. So
yep.
Any final thoughts, George?
No, I echo the sentiments. I mean, like we talked about earlier, there's guys that got, and like you said, Mike, veteran players that just seem to be dogging it, and not just in Detroit, but there's, like you said, other teams that have gotten can't get off the schneid. I really think that there's got to be. I don't know what they're going to do in Detroit. I don't know. Yzerman is getting his share of criticism, which he deserves, but.
We'll talk more about the Red Wings next week.
Okay.
I had a lot of things I wanted to get to tonight that were important, and we'll talk about them because we'll have more clarity over the weekend after they play the Boston Bruins, which is a nationally televised game on ABC, actually on the 8 p.m. An interesting storyline about ABC here locally. Local 10 is no longer the ABC affiliate. They won't be until August, so they ended up having to go to Channel 7. I don't know if you heard about that, Mike, but yeah, they did. They're going to be changing it a little bit to another Sunbeam location. So interesting how things, Local 10, I was talking to Will Manso at the Miami Hurricanes Pro Day, and I did attend that on, I think it was Monday, and it's pretty weird stuff. But so there'll be an independent station, but you'll still be able to get ABC here in the area, just at a different spot. And they've been affiliated with ABC for 68 years.
Wow.
Yeah. It just goes to show you how the media industry and the landscape definitely changes. So great show tonight. I know we got to a lot of great stuff. Tortorella, I think he'll land again for sure, but I think he'll be a lot more selective of where he goes. But Mike, after what you said about Boston, I'll be intrigued to find out if indeed the Boston Bruins would be his next stop. I really do, since he's from the area. And if it's coming from you, you really got me even more intrigued now. So
just a hunch.
Well, let me tell you, I'll take your hunches all day long. But
Mike, I got a coach for you up there.
Who's that?
Mike Sullivan.
Yeah, I mean,
I think they'll cut bait with him at the end of this year. I do.
I mean, I like Mike Sullivan. I think he's a good coach. He came into a situation that was ready-made to win Stanley Cups, but since then, he hasn't had a lot of success.
He hasn't won a playoff series since 17.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah. Playoff. Talk about a playoff drought.
Yeah, I've heard the cat calls there. We'll find out. But I've always learned, Mike, if you go with your hunches and your instincts, more times than not, they're generally right. But meanwhile, that does conclude this edition of the Sports Exchange. Before we go away, though, everybody's going to have a chance to get a hold of themselves. And Candy Eppley's going to have one more station break, and that station break is going to come right now. Go ahead, Candy, and give everybody a preview of what you have lined up for Fire Up at the top of the hour.
South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book, Lessons from the Microphone, tuning into the enduring wisdom of visionary leaders. The foreword was written by none other than George Eichhorn, and the book was written by your host, Scott the Motor City Madmouth Morganroth. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Google, and Apple Books. It talks about Scott's 40-plus years in the media and how it has changed and evolved. Get your copy today. There's also a link on our website at www.southfloridatribune.com, where there is a plethora of great content. Go check it out. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Monday nights, baseball. Tuesday nights, football. Wednesday and Thursday nights, you just never know what you're going to be getting, except Thursday nights is hockey night as well. And typically, last night, Scott and Megan Price, the Queen of Hoops, talked basketball on the Motor City Madmouth show. Go check out that show. That was a spectacular show. Tonight, following this, a little after 9, will be Fire Up. And we're going to be talking about opening day, some of the prices, some of the new foods you can find. And of course, we're going to talk a little March Madness too, and maybe some more. So check it, wait on that and check us out. If you want to advertise or sponsor a show, call Scott, 954-304-4941. And if you want to be a guest or have show ideas, you can always email us at southfloridatribune.com. And of course, this show is also presented by Hockey Operations LLC. There you go, Scott. Back to you.
All right, just a little FYI about Megan Price. Not only is she good with hoops, she's going to be coming on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk on April the 7th. And she does work with minor league baseball. So who knows, George, she might be on that show from time to time when you see her. But you said you needed the night off, and I couldn't think of a more prettier alternative than that. So, but if you're going to do the Pistons, Megan's going to be on. She's going to be looking good. So, Mark, I encourage you to take a look at Megan. This woman knows her stuff. She's, to me, old school media because she's one of those types of people that doesn't need topics in advance. She can think on her feet. I'm not saying there's anything wrong giving people topics as a guideline. But you talk to Megan, as I did last night with basketball. She didn't have anything. Boom. She spit off answered that fast. Unbelievable stuff. So Megan Price will be somebody I'm looking forward to working with more and more often. She does a great job with Candy on Chicks and Salsa and 3 Chicks in a Pod. Unbelievable stuff that we have with those girls. You have her, and then you also have Jennifer Matthews Lewis and Carrie Johnson as well. A great trio. All right. With that said, Mark Maraday, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
You can find me at the Original Sports Podcast with Mark Maraday or at Terrible Talk. The Original Sports Podcast with Mark Maraday show is live on Tuesday nights, and then we drop it on Thursday, both audio and video. You can also watch it on Roku on Tuesday nights from 7 to 8 on National Streaming Sports. Terrible Talk every Thursday night, all about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it airs on Roku on Sunday nights from 6 to 7.
Okay, George, go ahead. You have a book. You and I both won.
Oh, yes. You can find me at the South Florida Tribune under the contributors section. At the end of my column, there's always a tab there. If you want a link to Amazon to get yourself a copy of my book called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, which takes us back in history in Michigan and Detroit. Scott and I are both in the book, as is our dear, long-lost, unfortunate friend that died in Ernie Harwell. But there's many more stories in that book. You can reach me at the Yahoo at gicorn@yahoo.com, on Twitter or X at SanGSports99. Follow me on LinkedIn as well and Instagram as well. So hope to see you guys next week. Enjoy the hockey talk tonight, of course.
And to our sponsor, Mr. Santos. Now you can give us an update about what you're doing with hockey operations. We already got what your activities were last week. What's going on over there, and how can people reach you?
We still have the same stuff going on, and hopefully we will be launching our Team 33 product this summer. Still, we're on schedule to do that. It's a hockey hockey operations management program that I think fans and team people alike will be interested in. You can reach me at msantos with an S at hockeyoperations.org. I'll answer your questions if you send them in. You may not like my answers, but I'll always answer.
But meanwhile, you can see Mike every Thursday night here at 8 o'clock p.m. South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. We do the Sports Exchange National Hockey Night. Glad to have Mike on the show. We try to hit some of the biggest topics in all of the National Hockey League, pro, college, or where we come up with. Mike threw the curveball about Candy was gleaming about Wisconsin's women winning it all. And I know Candy's very, very proud of that, as much as I'm proud of the fact that we had a great show tonight. Any questions or comments or final thoughts from all you guys?
Enjoy the
Yeah.
fun. It's a fun time of year.
Sure is. Well, we'll have a lot more. We'll have a lot more topics next week to digest. But meanwhile, we hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Sports Exchange. Fire Up is next with Candy and in the Country Club. She'll have her group out there talking sports. She gave you an idea what it is. So after we get done, flip over from our network over our other network with the later broadcast tonight. So on behalf of George Eichhorn, the barber, Mark Meriday, and Mike Santos, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madball. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next Saturday night. I mean, not next Saturday night. My goodness. Next Thursday. No, Mike, I got to make sure it's Thursday because I don't want to go out there and feel like I'm losing it. Don't have all my marrow. So let me do it again. Next Thursday night, 8 o'clock p.m., Sports Exchange. Mike Santos, myself, the barber, George Eichhorn, and as a strong possibility, Mike Whittaker will be on as well. The guy that covers the Detroit Red Wings. Mike, I know you're going to enjoy seeing this guy. We have a lot of good young guys here in our system, and it's what it's all about, and keeping the generation of journalists going. I know you'll enjoy him. So with that said, good night, everybody. See you next Thursday night, yes, people, at 8 o'clock p.m. Bye now.